Good afternoon, SMBC parents. I'm really thankful to get to share a little bit of time with you all this afternoon. I'm actually sitting on the opposite side of the pavilion that I usually sit on just to kind of have a different view. And I'm really thankful to just share some thoughts with you for a few minutes. And I'm going to title this, that's kind of silly to say title, but I'm going to title this 15 Minutes About Middle School. And I just really wanted to just share a few thoughts in thinking about parents that have middle school students. And my hope and desire is that this would just be something to hang a thought on, or hang a prayer on, or hang a hat on of some sort in thinking about the realities of having middle school students as parents, that would not be in a canned way, hopefully not just a predictable word of developmentally, this is what it means to have a middle school student, but to be more focused on your hearts as a mom and a dad who have a middle school student. So that's what this is about. I'll refer to a spot that you could do a little bit of reading about at the end of this time, but just a few thoughts that I wanted to pass on to you just in thinking about you all as specifically parents of middle schoolers, and also praying for you. Consistency. These thoughts will kind of flow together. Your being consistently with your middle school student is, I believe, probably one of the most important things. This is a really interesting time because they're not ready to completely launch. They don't have a license yet. They're completely dependent on you to move around for the most part, unless they're getting a ride with a friend, etc. But there's definitely transition happening. And just to kind of dive right in, I think that the middle school years provide a crucible where the enemy, I believe, really likes to try to start dividing students away from parents and parents away from students. It can be as simple as you're irritated with each other, and that begins to leave a little bit of a wedge between you, or your student feels like that you're against them, and so this pitting against starts to grow and fester in some ways. And so I think probably one of the biggest things that I would want to encourage you as the parent of a middle school student is, and I'll touch on this in a second, but even when it hurts and when it really sucks, because they are not able to fully understand where you're coming from as a parent, that you are hopefully seeking to love them and be present with them, but it doesn't read that way. It can quickly seem like you're against or you're not interested. I believe that the enemy at this particular juncture of parent and student relationships, I believe he does really seek to take advantage of this particular time frame to sow discord amongst parents and middle school students. These phrases I have shared with you before, and I really am trying to communicate that it's not just some kind of fluff for a page, but that it's actually words to really think about, and it is about the word with, and it is what we are hopeful for in the student ministry here, as well as I'm starting to poke around some with women's ministry and men's ministry as well. But the phrases are journey with, process with, change with. And journey with, that mirrors the incarnation of Christ, that he came to be with us in the flesh, and not being trite, but literally you are seeking to embody that with your middle school student. You are seeking to be with them, especially when things begin to get a little goofy and a little crazy because of all that's happening inside of your middle school student, but then also keeping it real, everything that's happening inside of you as their parent. So journey with, process with. I think that's a potentially challenging, hard place with a middle school student, because there is some somewhat natural pulling away that happens, but trying to consistently be present there to process with your middle school student. I do believe that there's great value in that, and I think that's something that probably has to be really battled into, not fighting against them, but maybe seemingly at times it might seem like fighting against them, but trying to maintain that place where you are a place of processing for them, and then change with, that you're with them while all of this changing is going on. I know that y'all know what I know, and that is the level of hormonal change that is taking place inside of your sons and daughters is colossal. I mentioned to Amy here at the church just yesterday of just looking at some of our middle school students and just being aware that literally in this pandemic year, the physical transformation of our middle school students, of what they were like as this year began and what they're like as this year is coming to a close as far as school goes, it's mind-boggling, the change, the physical and hormonal change that takes place. And you know that the physical and hormonal changing that is going on them, it's crazy for them, and it's crazy for you. So much of their resource within them as a person is being funneled to the reality of them becoming a woman and them becoming a man, which they are not thinking that, and they're not aware of that. And sometimes we're not aware of that and we're not thinking that, but a ton is going on inside of them as they are shifting along the way. And so the consistency that you fight for to be with your middle school student, even if at times it feels like maybe you're scraping and clawing for that width of just barely hanging on to some semblance of, I'm with you and I want you to know that. I think the consistency of that can be really, really important. I don't want to communicate a place of pressure, like you better be with your student. If God is allowing you to have presence with them, I'm really thankful for that. I'm aware that there are circumstances sometimes where that with may seem somewhat non-existent. And I would actually just want to say, in that little arena, I'm available. I would be very interested if anybody happens to be in a place where they're feeling particularly desperate because maybe you feel like that you're losing your with your student. And that is not a place of condemnation. That's a place of invitation to say, I would be really interested in just getting to listen to you and hear you about that. I really want to share with you as a mom and dad that I believe that you, in places that are hard inside of your in places where the rolling of eyes is really hurting your feelings or it's irritating you, I actually, and this may be kind of a different take than most or some may give, but I want to encourage you to take the tack of communicating calmly, hopefully, with your middle school student about how what is going on is affecting you. And I'm going to tell you specifically why I think that. I think it's really valuable that they know that you're not a robot and that you're a human and that you are also affected by things the way that they are. And I can feel a couple of thoughts breaking off of this, so I'm going to try to keep track of them. I think that's really valuable for them for a couple reasons. I think that it helps to give you an outlet to not just be having to be robotic, meaning well, I just have to grin and bear it, and I'm not going to be letting them know how I am in the midst of this. No, I think it gives you the opportunity to be honest and candid and authentic with them about how both the joys and the struggles are affecting you. And that's a big one. Another big one that I feel like is maybe sometimes missed is you are actually showing them a pattern of how they potentially will relate with their sons and daughters. Some years from now, if they are having children, they're married, they're going to be navigating this exact same time that you are. And I think that there is a lot of power inside of you setting a pattern for them that you don't hold back. Of course, I'm saying do this appropriately, but you don't hold back from them how you're being affected and impacted at times, because that allows you to be real, for you to not be a robot, and it gives them a context for what it will be like when they get to share about how things are affecting them, perhaps when they're a mom or a dad one day. I could talk on about that for a while, but that does feel really important to me. So I want to just be an encourager to you all to appropriately let them in on how whatever might be going on with them, both joys and struggles, about the fact that it does affect you and that you're not keeping that from them. And I'm curious about the fruit that might come out of that as you then are a grandparent one day, perhaps, and you're watching them interacting with their sons and daughters. The second family, their peers and school friends begin to at times take on what seems to be even more of a significant role than your current nuclear family does. And I found along the way that sometimes that's kind of offensive, that this person and this family that you've invested in over these years, that there begins to be perhaps at times disinterest or disregard for patterns that you've set and things that you like to do in favor of sometimes these people that you don't really necessarily even know who they are. I remember, do you remember this? I remember when I was in middle school that my friends were really, really strongly important and influential in my life, and I longed to be with them. And I think in many cases it's still the same. And so I just want to just say that out loud, that the second family that your sons and daughters are very strongly connected in, that is a really, really strong pull. And obviously there's lots to navigate there about what you sense about the impact of your sons and daughters' second family, of their peers and their friends, about how you pursue getting to know their friends and what opportunities do you have for that. But just want to acknowledge out loud that sometimes the second family can be kind of interesting to navigate internally also. I think that we want strong, healthy friendships for our sons and daughters, but I think there's also times where that's kind of weird when your family has been kind of the primary over a bunch of years, and that begins to shift, and just acknowledging that transition. Getting close to 15 minutes, just a little bit over. Conversations, I think, tend to start to be at times challenging in middle school. I'm thinking about guys and the one-word answers of fine and good, no, yes, and just the art of staying in that. I do have awareness that some females seem to have more words than others. Not all, but that does seem to be in some ways at times how that kind of breaks down. But I just want you to know that I am going to be praying with you that you would have courage to keep pursuing conversations. I once again want to say I'm not saying that in a place of pressure. I'm saying that from a place of hopefulness. And I want to be a friend in your life to say I'm praying that you would keep looking for even the thinnest thread of a conversation with your sons and daughters. And some of you may be looking at me and going, what are you talking about, man? Like we're talking. If that's the case, I'm really, really thankful and glad about that. I'm also aware that there are some where, bluntly speaking, there are some of you, if you're choosing to watch this, that there are some patterns that are already set, that there's very little conversation happening because it's just awkward and it's just hard, and it won't change. It continues to get harder and harder at times. And so if I could be present with you in any way to just think creatively about trying to stay engaged in some way in having conversations with a vision for later conversations. And I think that that is a part of the journey with, process with, change with, is just staying in that with them with a long-term vision. So I would love to talk to anybody about that. If anybody feels currently stuck about conversations with middle school son or daughter, I would love to interact with you about that, but mainly just be with you, to pray with you about that. And again, my desire is not to communicate pressure, but just to be with you about that. And then the last thing is I want to keep encouraging us as a community to practice what is called holy relating, and that is we are seeking to be present with each other in healthy ways, not manipulative, not sarcastic, not bypassing. That we're looking for ways to try to stay engaged in some way with relating with one another in a way that is possible because Christ is present in us. And so I want to close with that thought, and that is not, Mom and Dad, Damon, be a good communicator. Hang in there and make sure you're relating in a good, wholesome way. That's really not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, because our relational heritage is the heritage of the Father, Son, and the Spirit and their community, it gives us the opportunity to keep fighting for holy, healthy conversation and relating with our spouses and with our sons and daughters, and specifically with you, as I'm thinking about with your middle school sons and daughters. Jesus, I want to thank you for our families at SMBC, and I want to ask God, I pray that you would use some thought in this 17 minutes to be an encouragement, or perhaps to be a prick of some sort, just to say, you know what, I'd really like to talk about that. And I pray that you would use this however you choose. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to be present with the moms and dads of middle school students at SMBC. Thank you for the beauty of this day. Thank you for the spring that is coming. I want to pray for families that are particularly celebrating peacefulness and joyfulness now. I thank you for that. I receive that with them. I want to pray for any family that is listening to this that are really struggling and feel some measure of desperation or feel stuck. And I pray, God, that you would be present with them, remind them of your presence. And I pray that if there's value in conversation, that you would give them a step towards that. Thank you for this time, Father. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me, if you've gotten to do that. And the main point of this is to say, if there's anything that jumpstarts a conversation and you would like to reach out, please do. It would be my honor. Bless you all.